Hey everyone, I'm Army Gaming, welcome back to my channel and welcome to Monster Analysis. Up for analysis today is Tulekahju. Tulekahju lives in the dry mountains of the west. He has a band of eagles that serve him and inform him on the progress of battles. When he decides it's time to act, he draws his sword and swings the fate of battle according to his will. And so here we have what in my opinion is a really cool looking monster, and according to my extensive Google research, Tulekahju is actually Estonian for fire, so I think that's pretty cool, and I may be butchering the actual pronunciation, and if I am, just know that I'm sorry ahead of time. But anyways, like I said, this monster has an incredible monster design, and as of the time recording this video, there are a total of 27 fire legendary monsters, so I'm going to be comparing Tulekahju to those remaining monsters. And let me just say before I actually jump into the analysis, I really don't think this monster is getting enough credit, so this analysis might be a little longer than usual. So Tulekahju has a power of 3509, which is a pretty high power, however it places him in 10th place along with monsters like General Darmith, Rrabbits, and Darmith's pet. And one of the main reasons he appears to be placed very low, even though it's a pretty high power, is because of the new nemesis Lucifer monster. Thanks to the addition of these monsters in the fire category, they now took 3 places above Tulekahju. So if this analysis would have been done prior to the release of the new fire nemesis monster, Tulekahju would have been tied for 7th place, but like I said, 3509, that's still an extremely good power. Honestly, any power over 3500, it's extremely good. And the same thing can be said for the live. 28,651 puts this monster in 10th place, along with monsters like Firestorm, Raccoon, and Greedy Dragon. And prior to the release of the Lucifer monsters, this stat would have put Tulekahju in tied for 7th place. But regardless, it's still a really high life, which is kind of weird because normally when we see a monster with a really high power, we don't tend to see a high life. Normally the life suffers being somewhere around the 22k range. And what's even more strange for what appears to be an attacker is that he has the amazing speed of 3465, which ties to that of lots of deny monsters, and in the fire category, this is actually the fastest base stat. So Tulekahju is actually tied with Lucifer the Hell Taster, the new nemesis fire monster, as well as General Darmith and Shalinar, 2 amazing fire legendary monsters. So far this monster has incredible stats, indicative of an attacker, but also you're going to see it's indicative of an anti-deny monster, while at the same time being a supportive monster. And to make things even better, his trait is hardened. All status effects have a 20% less accuracy against it. Now I think that in the past I would have said that it would have been better if this monster was immune to stun, or maybe even immune to burning because it is a fire monster, so now he's prone to being stunned, he's prone to being burned. But actually, the more and more the game moves forward, the more that we have these team wars that involve monsters from different elements, it's very possible that you're going to face monsters that have free skills, that have possession skills, mega stun skills, hack skills. There's all these different skills that in reality, having the trait hardened is one of the best traits you can have. Hardened, Tough, and Bulwark are going to be must-have traits, so in my opinion it's really good that this monster has this hardened trait moving forward. And automatically when a monster has a hardened trait, they're inherently great monsters to put on defense, because now the enemy can't rely on denying them. It's only an 80% chance for the deny effect to land as opposed to being a 100% chance. So we once again have a monster with an amazing design, amazing stats, and an amazing trait. And you're going to see this monster has amazing skills, and for some reason this monster isn't getting enough credit. But like I said, this is going to be a longer than usual analysis, and I'll get into why I think this monster is a lot more amazing than originally meets the eye. So as for his ultimate skill, we have Fire Whip. Deals heavy fire damage to all enemies, may burn, blind, and apply damage reduction to all enemies. His ultimate attack is a fire-based AoE that deals 55 damage, which honestly isn't that much for an ultimate skill. However, you have to take into consideration it's not just an ultimate skill that deals damage, it also applies burning, which over the course of 3 turns takes away a total of 45% of the enemy's HP. Each turn it takes away 15%. It also applies damage reduction, which for 2 turns reduces the enemy's damage output by 25%. The enemy monsters are going to deal less damage when they attack you, but as an added bonus, it also applies blind, which reduces the enemy's accuracy by 50% for the next 2 turns, which means the likelihood of them even landing a hit on you is significantly reduced, especially if they try to do an AoE, and seriously, even with a single hit, it's significantly reduced. It's reduced by 50%, and even if they do manage to hit you, the damage reduction takes away 1/4 of what it normally would do. And so overall, I personally think this skill is really great. Even though it's only 55 damage and fire base, normally I say it's better when a skill is special base. That's not exactly the case with this monster, because he actually does have a skill that makes the enemy very weak to fire attacks. So let's just say that on the first turn you happen to use the skill that makes the enemy weak to fire attacks, and then on the next turn you get your ultimate, they're as good as gone. And so far we have a monster with an amazing design, amazing stats, an amazing trait, and an amazing ultimate. As for skills group 1, there's nothing really to brag about, so we're going to move on over to skills group 2. And the first skill we have in skills group 2 is Cursed Flames. Deals very heavy fire damage, removes positive status effects from all enemies, requires cooldown. Here we have a fire-based attack that deals 55 damage, costs 31 stamina with a 1 turn cooldown. The cooldown is significantly low for a skill that's an AoE remove positive effects. And just to make one thing clear, this only targets one enemy, it only inflicts damage to one enemy, but it does remove positive effects from all of the enemy team. And so as far as being a fire-based monster, the reason this skill is really good is because one of the monsters you may encounter is the General Darmith, and Darmith has a skill called Dragon Berserker, which allows him to ignore 50% of incoming damage, and it also gives him a double damage boost. So that can be a serious threat because it's really hard to kill a General Darmith that ignores 50% of incoming damage. That's basically the same as having double life. And not only does he essentially have double life, he can inflict double damage. So a skill like Curse Flame is incredibly helpful to get rid of that buff. And not to mention, a skill like this is also extremely helpful against all sorts of monsters. Against light monsters, for example, you can get rid of their stamina regeneration, their life regeneration, any shield they may have. The same for earth monsters, you can get rid of those annoying shields. And as for going against nature monsters, not only do you have an elemental advantage, you can also get rid of their annoying life regeneration. And so in my opinion, this skill is extremely valuable, especially like I said moving forward when we have all the different team wars involving bugs, which can mean bringing all sorts of different monsters into a team war. It's no longer always going to be fire versus fire, now it can be your fire monster versus nature, magic, light. There's so many endless combinations. And unfortunately, it's extremely hard to gauge how great this monster is until he's actually placed in a book. Once this monster is placed in a book and we get to see the other monsters that are in the book with him, that's when we're really going to tell how good this monster can potentially be. But as for right now, just know that this skill is in my opinion really good. Next up we have Fire Target, deals very heavy fire damage, may burn target, requires cooldown. This skill is a fire based attack that deals 60 damage to a single enemy monster, 31 stamina cost, 1 turn cooldown, and it applies burning. And what can I say other than this is a pretty straightforward attack. A nice amount of damage, 60, and it also applies a DLT burning. Against fire monsters this would obviously not be that effective, however against any other elemental monster it's extremely good. A high amount of damage, and even if that monster doesn't die with that 60 damage, they're going to be burned. So all you have to do is take away 85% of their HP, and then burning does the rest. Keep in mind that when a monster dies with a DLT, the next monster in the turn order, his or her turn is going to be skipped, so you can use that to your advantage. And in my opinion, this is yet another great skill. And as for the next skill in skills group 2, we have Ice Blocker, deals very heavy fire damage, gives freeze immunity to all allies. So this skill targets a single enemy, it deals 50 fire based damage, it costs 28 stamina, and it has no cooldown, and this skill gives you freeze immunity. Now, if you're watching this video when it was first released, you're probably thinking, why the heck does this skill give freeze immunity? Currently there are no fire monsters that have freeze skills, and I will agree with you, but again you have to take into consideration that the dynamic of Monster Legends is changing. The team wars we have now can involve all sorts of monsters, depending on what book this monster is placed in, so like I said, we can't really know for sure how good this monster is until he's in a book. But if it so happens that this monster is in a book that has a lot of monsters, a lot of deny monsters that have freeze skills, then this monster can be potentially really good, because you can give this monster 3 speed runes, run Ice Blocker, and have him run freeze immunity to protect all of your teammates. And that's just trying to think ahead, but even in this current team wars, even in this current meta, if you happen to have a fire water war, and in one of those books happens to be a monster with an AoE free skill, then you can once again use this monster to counter. Now of course you could always use a deny monster yourself to deny the enemy, but that's not always the option. Sometimes you have to think outside the box. Sometimes it's better to bring a monster with a freeze immunity, in which case Tulekahju really does it best. And so I honestly think that's one of the main reasons this monster isn't getting enough credit. Right now we're comparing this monster to the rest of the monsters in the game, which is a fair comparison to make, but I think it's also good to try to think ahead, to try to look at what other monsters Social Point is going to release. If we take a look at the Earth element, they released Baba Yaga. Baba Yaga is the first Earth monster with an AoE possession, and most Earth monsters are immune to stun, so Baba Yaga is really game changing in that respect. And as far as the magic monsters, most of them are immune to possession, and we do have Uru who has an AoE stun skill, but now we recently got Cassandra who also has an AoE stun skill. So as you're starting to see, they're starting to release more and more monsters from their own element that can deny their own element. So let me just tell you guys that it's only a matter of time before we get a fire monster with a possession skill, or a fire monster with a free skill. And when that happens, when the fire monster with the free skill does come out, actually what am I even saying? The new nemesis Lucifer the Hope Freezer, she actually does have a free skill, but I'm talking about a fire monster with an AoE free skill that's available to all players. When that monster does come out, you're really gonna wish you had this monster with Ice Blocker. So when taking a look at new monsters that are released, sure, look at how they compare to other elements currently in the game, but also try to have some foresight and try to think about where this monster can fit in a future bug, or where this monster can fit in current bugs, or whether or not this monster can be good, assuming other monsters come out that have deny skills and so forth. So with that being said, all of the skills from skills group 2 are actually really good, and depending on what kind of build you're going to build, you're going to want to choose different skills. So I'll get into that at the very end of the video. And so moving on to skills group 3, we have Melting Sword. Deals very heavy fire damage, removes all negative status effects from all allies, requires cooldown. This skill targets a single enemy, dealing 65 fire based damage, 31 stamina cost, 1 turn cooldown, and it removes all debuffs from all of your allies. Now in my opinion this skill is extremely good, not because of the damage output, that actually is one of the reasons, but the reason it's really good is because of the removed debuffs. Considering this monster himself isn't immune to burning, which makes him susceptible to being burned against other fire monsters, then it's really good that he can remove that debuff. But not only can he remove debuffs from himself, he removes debuffs from his entire team. And considering he has a harden trait, let's just say you're in a situation where the enemy does an AoE stun skill, and your Tulekahju happened to not get stunned, but your teammates got stunned. Well, when it's Tulekahju's turn, you can use Melting Sword, inflict a nice amount of damage, potentially kill an enemy, and not only did you eliminate an enemy monster, your other teammates are free to attack now thanks to the team removed debuff effect. And so in Skills Group 3 we have yet another incredible skill. And I really love how the cooldowns are so low. A 1-turn cooldown, you can easily cycle the different skills with this monster. And next up we have Skin Burner, and of course a fire monster wouldn't be complete without his AoE burning skill. So this skill deals moderate fire damage to all enemies, may burn targets, requires cooldown. It's a fire-based attack that deals 45 damage to all of the enemy monsters, a 28 stamina cost, which is extremely low for a skill of this magnitude. You normally never see a 45 AoE that also does a DOT with a 28 stamina cost. However, it does have the regular cooldown of a 3-turn cooldown, and like I already said, it applies burning. And I honestly don't have much to say other than this is a pretty amazing skill, nice amount of damage, it applies burning, against fire monsters may not be the most effective skill, but against every other element it's extremely powerful, and not to mention if you've ever put this monster on defense, you definitely want to have Skin Burner and just hope that the AI actually starts off with this skill. And as for the last skill we have Open Flesh, deals moderate fire damage to all enemies, gives fire weakness to all enemies, requires cooldown. And so Open Flesh is a fire based attack that targets one single enemy dealing 40 damage, it costs 28 stamina, this time it has a 2-turn cooldown, but it applies sticky lava to all of the enemy targets. So once again, this only deals damage to one initial monster, but the sticky lava effect, that's an AoE, so all of the enemy monsters are going to be hit with sticky lava. And Open Flesh is essentially a really great setup skill. It can be a setup skill for himself, because after doing Open Flesh, he can do Skin Burner, and the enemy monsters are really going to feel the heat. Or if you happen to have another fire-based monster in your team, you can do Open Flesh to set up for that other fire-based monster, and then that fire monster can do its strong fire-based AoE. So just like Skills Group 2, Skills Group 3 is absolutely amazing. And now that begs the question, which skills do you actually want to run? Because you have 6 amazing skills to choose from, and one thing you notice is that they are all fire-based. Oh, and by the way, Open Flesh was the skill I was talking about. If you happen to do Open Flesh on the first turn, and on the next turn get your ultimate skill, then that would be a really great combo. But going back to skill sets, what skills do you want to choose? Well, first let's talk about the different builds. The first way to run this monster is to run him as an attacker. You saw his high power, you saw his high speed, you saw his good trait, he can be a pretty good attacker. If you want to use this monster as an attacker, I would recommend running Open Flesh, Skin Burner, and then your choice of either Melting Sword, Cursed Flames, or Fire Target. You honestly really can't go wrong with either of them. Between the 3 though, I think I would gravitate towards Fire Target, just because it does deal 60 damage and applies burning, and you never know when that burning will come in handy to finish off the enemy monster and skip the next monster in the turn order, especially if it's your Tulekahju and then 2 enemy monsters. If you can target the first monster, deal enough damage to the point that burning kills them, the next monster's turn is skipped and then it goes to your monster, and that can help you get 3 coins in Team Wars. So definitely go with Fire Target. As for the last skill, it's going to be Cursed Flames or Melting Sword. Both of these skills are really good. If you're going with the attacker build, I imagine you're going to want to go with Melting Sword, because it deals a lot more damage at 65 as opposed to Cursed Flame, which is 55. The upside to Cursed Flame is that it removes all positive effects from the enemy targets, so if they have shields you can get rid of that, if they have any buffs you can get rid of that, and thus you can make it a lot easier for your team to get rid of the enemy targets. On the other side, Melting Sword, this helps your team if you have any debuffs, so especially if you're stunned, frozen, and you're not frozen yourself, you can get rid of those debuffs. If you have burning, ignition, any sort of debuff, it can be completely gone. And so like I said, you have quite a few different number of options. Open Flesh and Skin Burner in my opinion are must-have skills on an attacker build, and so Melting Sword, Cursed Flames, Fire Target, that's up to you. My personal preference would be Fire Target and Melting Sword. And one variation would be to not do Fire Target and just run Cursed Flames and Melting Sword, that way you're protected against debuffs and buffs. And as far as runes, you would go the typical attacker rune setup, 2 strength runes and a speed rune. And now let's move on over and talk about an anti-deny build. And in this case, it's not 100% anti-deny, it's honestly more of an anti-freeze build I should say. And so in the current meta, this build would only work if you're going up against monsters that have an AoE freeze skill. So primarily against water monsters, but also against an enemy Krampus if you happen to be faster than Krampus, because Krampus does have an AoE freeze skill also. And so if you're running this monster as an anti-freeze monster, you want to run Cursed Flames, Melting Sword, and Skin Burner. And the main reason you want to run these skills is because you're going to be running all speed runes, which means there's no point in having really strong powerful attacks. The main objective of your monster is to make sure your whole team doesn't get denied and to support them as best as possible. Ice Blocker ensures that your team can't be frozen. Cursed Flames helps your team out in that whatever buff the enemy may have, you can get rid of it. And then Melting Sword helps to clear any negative effect your team may have. And as for Skin Burner, that's just your way of dealing damage. When you have all speed runes, you really want to prioritize DLTs, because DLTs, it doesn't matter if your power is 0 or if your power is over 10,000. Once a DLT is applied, that DLT takes away a certain amount of percentage of the monster's life, so it's not dependent on your power anymore, it's completely dependent on the enemy monster's HP. And so that would be my recommendation for an all-speed build: Skin Burner, Melting Sword, Cursed Flames, and Ice Blocker. And so currently in the game, trying to use this monster as an anti-freeze monster, there's really only certain situations when he's going to come in handy. But like I said, moving forward, trying to think ahead of what Soldier Point is going to release, once more fire monsters with freeze skills get released, especially considering that we currently only have one fire monster immune to freeze, that's when I think you're going to see that this monster can be potentially really great. And so I would personally advise everyone not to completely dismiss this monster. He may not be the best monster right now, but he can certainly rise to the occasion in the future. He has a great design, he has great stats, he has a great trait, he has great skills, he can be an attacker, he can be a deny monster / a supportive monster. Overall, I would say this is a really great monster, and definitely worth picking up if you're able to. And with that being said, that is going to conclude my analysis on Tulekahju. I really hope everyone enjoyed this analysis. I hope I was able to shed some light on the usability of this monster, as well as the future possible usability of this monster, and I hope I was able to relay the message to not completely discount a monster just because he may not be good in the current meta. Because with a game as dynamic as Monster Legends, where so much is changing fast, it's honestly possible for any monster to become extremely good in the next meta. And so now is the part of the video where I want to hear from all of you guys. What do you guys think about this monster? And how do you think he compares to other fire monsters? And also, do you guys think there's any book he fits in currently, or do you think they're gonna have to make a whole new book that he can fit in? Who knows, maybe we'll get an alien book, as this monster does look kind of alien looking and there's plenty of other alien looking monsters. Anyways, with that being said, I'm Armor Gaming. Good luck to all of you in your Monster Legends adventures. Like always, remember to dream big and pursue your passions.